So when I heard your comments on the ever closer union, I wondered if we use the proper political language to talk about these issues, because we heard earlier that morning that European integration leads to a semantic shift of our political concepts like sovereignty, federalism, and so on. Federalism is a good example. So I wonder, the German Federal Constitutional Court pointed out in its famous Maastricht adjudication that there mustn't be a federalist system on the European level. But I wonder, if we look at the administrative system, if we look, for example, at the strong position the European Commission has, for example, in regulating the economic system of the European Union, or if we look at the effects of the monetary union, which we talk this afternoon, there is a federalist system in Europe, without any doubt. So I wonder if this discussion about a federalization of the European Union is in fact a spectre discussion. And also, I wonder, what does sovereignty of Europe, or sovereignty of the member states, still mean if we take into account that the European Central Bank has created a, let me say, a debt union between at least the member states having the euro currency. What does European sovereignty mean in that terms, regarding that the member states lack financial sovereignty and lack to a greater extent as well economic sovereignty? So my point and my question would be, do we need to develop the terms, the political terms we reflect on, not in order to miss the point, but to discuss things according to the facts we meet? Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure that speaking about federalism in the EU, that you are right in this in your comment that we already have a federation of the European Union. I'm not quite sure. Although there are elements that opposing us, many things that are really in favor of federation of the European Union Federation, but I'm not quite sure that we have this federation de lege lata. But what we miss here, speaking about federation, we have roots from Wenton and Manifesto, from ideas of Konrad Adenauer and so on and so forth. And I will not go into the details. But we really have some kind of sui generis political system. I'm not a part of it, but I'm still a European citizen. And we really have this kind of political system, sui generis institutions, which looks like federation, but only looks like. They are not de lege lata, and maybe the lege ferenda official position of the European Union citizens. Because there are a lot of interesting debates going on in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe, and as Professor said, we have to be careful because we are not enemies. We have to be jointly to speaking with one language maybe, or with several languages, but we have to see what is our aim at the end, what is our point at the end. Do we need a unified federation which will be not useful for all people, or do we need an elitist federation, elitist institutions, which are beneficiary only for the stronger and for the biggest country in the European Union? We have to be very careful, because sometimes other people which are not so demographically with not big numbers, we are frustrated about the idea of federalization. We are frustrated. Why? Because we feel that we will lose something in our path of going to a federation concept. That's why we have to be very cautious about this idea. That is first thing. The second thing, it is very interesting speaking about the federation and speaking about the role of the national constitutional courts. It is very interesting, and maybe we need another conference to deal with this question. National constitutional courts are also not equal in their positions regarding the EU issues. For example, there were no hysteria, no loud loud speaking about the German Constitutional Court decisions, about the French Constitutional Court decision, about the Italian contra limite doctrine, about the Spanish Constitutional Court, but there was massive hysteria about the Hungarian decisions from the Constitutional Court, and about the Polish Constitutional Tribunal of this very similar aspects. Very similar aspects. For example, German constitutional courts have their own vision about their own German national democracy, and they have stick to this vision very, very tough. But if Hungarian Constitutional Court want to protect their national democracy, then euphoria, negative euphoria is here. Nuclear option for infringement of rule of law principle is here. And we see these double standards. And speaking about federation, I think that we will copy these double standards in the federation, maybe in the next step of the Federation Union. And this is not good. So we have to see. I think that the idea is not only related to the formal concept, but to the substance. We have to feel, we have to see, and we have to speak loudly and clearly what is the future of the EU in the terms of substance, not about the formal. Formality is good, but is necessity, but it's not key point, key issue. The key issue is substance. What we need for the future generation, what we need. Do we need more greater union, like speaking in one voice, or do we need union where we will have like a family, people which are feeling that they have their dignity, that they have their human rights, that they have their democracy, that they have their feeling that belongs in the European Union. So we must, I think that the most important thing to speak about is the substance, not the formality. And maybe Professor will have something to add. Professor Greiser, or?
Well, if I shall, yeah, sure. Thanks very much. Yeah, I'll be very brief. One thing, just a difference in perception. I think the reaction to the German PSPP was quite hysteric, and rightly so. And I agree also that the reactions to the Polish and the Hungarian decisions was stronger, but the way PSPP was framed was much milder. So in a way, and remember, there was an infringement proceeding, and it was a relatively minor issue. So
yeah, but you don't have any restrictions regarding funds.
Yeah, because they pulled back, right? The German government pulled back right away. So this was quite a different reaction, but definitely an issue for a long debate. But as I said, I think the German, at least the debate was strong.
Sorry,
and
about the competence? No reaction.
Yeah, but that was an obiter dictum, right? And largely agreed upon by the others. Anyways, but as we see, another conference maybe. The other one, I wanted to apologize. Basically, I said, I talked about federalism, and I used this relatively kind of clearly defined but narrow conception of federalism. And still, I fully agree with you. One should not use the F word. I think it's much, much better if we were to avoid these notions. And it's not just federal, as you mentioned. It's sovereignty, it's democracy, it's federalism. it's, I had another one on the list. Yeah, identity maybe, right? All the legal concepts tend to be those concepts that pertain to this unresolved question might be dangerous. And I realize, I mean, federalism has been a trigger today also in the debates of much anger. And maybe using neutral terms like multi-level governance that do not trigger this and allow us to look at substance, exactly as you said. Federalism, you can a German colleague of mine defined 9 criteria of constitutionalism, of constitution, when the Constitutional Treaty was at stake. And then, I mean, you can tick that off and you'll get a differentiated picture, and there's no way to be really upset about that if it's 7-2 or 4-3, whether something is a constitution or not. And the same applies for federalism. I could come up with 5, 6, 7 criteria of what is a federal system or not. And the key issue that we need to debate doesn't depend on the terms. And I do think that we definitely agree on it's a matter of degree which way one would go. And there are certainly areas we could agree upon that we need more central power or more central efficiency. Think about all the democracy and separation of powers issues that we heard. Also the issue, by the way, of not allowing one country to veto the accession of another one. But that sounds like centralism, doesn't it? At least something less decentral. So there are ways in which we might need more of one dimension and less of the other, and probably not using federalism, etc., could help. That's far, thanks.
All right. This is a big issue in Europe, how much diversity needs to be preserved and how much unity has to be reached in order to keep the European Union an organization or a quasi-state, whatever we want, a federation, functioning positively, constructively, effectively, in a way which brings benefits. And I agree with you, what you said, Professor, that as a matter of fact, we have reached a kind of level of federalism in the European Union. Not everybody says this. There are politicians who start talking about federalism, but at least until very recently it hasn't been spoken openly. But you know, for me, and this is also a Polish perspective, the thing which I was talking about is that we Europeans should think to what extent the process should go, because maybe there is a point, there is a border, which if we cross this border, then maybe some kind of destructive tendencies may be released, and this is the biggest concern, right? And it needs debate. It definitely needs debate. We have an example of Brexit. I agree with what was said today. I heard a remark that for some capitals in Europe, it was a comfortable situation that the Great Britain left the European Union. But for the project as a whole, I mean, the European Union, that was a tragedy, as a matter of fact, right? And I agree, because I remember talks which were run between Jacques Chirac and Tony Blair. Jacques Chirac used a term federalism, and Tony Blair said definitely no, that this direction is wrong. So this is definitely a big concern, but also the concern is what you said, Tanya, in your speech. Honestly, I don't understand. Maybe I misunderstood something, because you said that democracy should be incorporated into the concept of ever closer union. We're right, it sounds nice, but a question here arises whether it's possible. Can you imagine democracy in the European Union in the current situation? And well, I know we could start, you know, long-term debates, what democracy is, etc. But if we assume that democracy is based on demos, this is the core issue, the most important thing, right? Then a reflection has to arrive, is it possible? Because I have doubts, I have truly doubts that it's possible, right? Well, it triggers further consequences. I mean, the lack of democracy triggers further consequences. If we say that we have state, but we don't have democracy, then we have authorities operating in arbitrary way. We don't have proper protection of individuals, of humans, right, who do not have any influence on what is going on in the center, etc., right? So this is another big concern. And in my speech, I was trying to address something which is, for me personally, very important, that in Europe, the debate should be being run very, very carefully. When I hear politicians making statements that, right, we need to reach federation, whatever it means, within a couple of years, then I'm horrified, to be honest, because, as I said, there may be a point, I'm not saying that there is, but there may be a point when these bad, destructive tendencies may be started, may be moved. And we should all be, in my opinion, very careful about the idea of further integration, which does not mean that the integration should not be continued, because there are areas in which we should cooperate, we Europeans, right?
Little comment about your question regarding the federalism and federation. We have to divide these two processes. We have to, because of the audience, maybe not of all of them are legal scientific workers, so we have to divide these questions. That federalism is a process that is going on decades. Yeah? Because we have euro, financial processes, we have economic processes, we have political processes. So federalism is content of these processes. But speaking about federation, that is something else. That is a formal political form of governance that we should be very carefully about. And we should not mix these two concepts. Federalism is one concept, federation is something else. And speaking about the ever closer union concept, I will only add that I was thinking about the to gather all the national democracy, Professor Pastutsko, all the national democracy in this concept of ever closer union. Not democracy as a category or as a principle, but all the national democracy to be part of this ever closer union concept. And not only democracy, but also sovereignty and constitutional identity of the member states, because this is the content of the ever closer union by my position, because I have my personal view. So national democracy, as I already said, national democracy is very important to be into the European Union, because with this, as I said, bottom-up principle, we will make a relation between what is going on in the European Union and what is going on in the national states. In many areas, the situation is very bad because we are lacking of relations and we are lacking of contacts and we're lacking of explaining the position from the national and European level. So now, in this moment, we are sometimes, I'm feeling that sometimes we are living in a parallel world, national and European, and that's why we need to have a bridge between this. And national democracy is really the most important thing that we should stick on and produce more democracy in the European Union in that way.
Thank you. To create a federal state, or speaking about federalism, firstly, we need a state. To speak about a state, we need sovereignty. To speak about sovereignty, we need one main element of the sovereignty concept, people. To create a homogeneous people, a society, we need national identity, feelings of belongings to the community, to a nation, to a state. Until when the European peoples, the European societies have a stronger feelings to belong to a nation, a national identity is stronger than the European identity. To create a federal state or federal system, we need artificial tools. The European federal state, based on stronger national identities than a European identity, will be an artificial creature which could not be strong, stable, and workable, I think.
I think that quite a lot was said about the advantages and disadvantages of introducing the euro, but I would like to ask on a more specific issue, namely that the notion was introduced, the notion of forint as a national currency was introduced into the Hungarian constitution. And I would like to ask your opinion on this. Whether do you think that it's a fortunate move to secure or try to secure the status of the national currency this way, especially when we see that the future can bring us quick challenges, quick changes. Whether this would be not just an obstacle that would make us less flexible when it will be necessary to adopt the euro, and whether it is not strange from a country that in theory has the legal obligation to introduce the euro to put some other currency than the euro into its national constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. I have to say that this was my private opinion that maybe it would be great to introduce the euro when we had the opportunity. And I wouldn't like to answer your question because I'm not a politician, I'm not part of the Hungarian government. It was not my decision to write it into the fundamental law, so thank you very much for the question, but I really need this work at the Ferenc Mádl Institute.
Concerning the symbolism of national currency, because it is discussed in Czechia as well, how Czech crown is a symbol of stability, and it indeed might be the case. However, I just what I wanted to make the pro-euro point is the fact that in the past there probably was not a better symbol of stability than the Deutsche Mark, and still they opted for the euro. So the symbolism surely is important, but at the end of the day, as you said, it is I believe a political decision whether we want to join to take the euro or not. Not entirely an economic one and not entirely a legal one. You will always be able to make arguments both ways.
I remember the question good. You question if it's appropriate to encourage some currency, some kind of currency in the constitution. So when I speak for Slovakia, we have no other choice. we cannot decide. We can't go back or turn back. For us, it's a fact that's longer than almost more than 15 years. So it's not a question in Slovakia about the sins or the purpose of the euro. But one remark regarding your question. 2 weeks ago, the National Assembly of Slovak Republic adopted an amendment, an act, constitutional act, which amends the Slovak constitution in that way that stipulates a guarantee for cash payments in Slovak Republic. And that was quite questionable if it's not contrary to the treaty or the statute, and if it's not redundant, if it was necessary to stipulate this guarantee.
There were professors from Hungary, from Poland, and I remember that they mentioned these things, but however, my question would refer to everyone. Whoever is willing to answer, it is possible. That person is welcome. Well, we mentioned many times in our Central European countries that our peoples were very infatuated, very obsessed with the European Union at the beginning, with the lifestyle, with that economic well-being, and that it somehow disappeared in the last decade. And it is the most evident in Hungary and in Poland. There are voices especially in political theory and in economic theory, that the economic well-being and the overall situation of human rights in the European economic community was stimulated and determined by the existence of the alternative bloc of the Warsaw Pact and of the Soviet Union, because Soviet Union was able to exert its influence also in Western countries. For example, in Italy, which had the strongest communist party, and that paradigm changed after 91. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And that is maybe one of the reasons why there is a disappointment in our countries, because that kind of economic well-being was not achieved. I would like to know, what do you think about that? Do you consider this statement, this opinion as true, or maybe it wasn't like that? So to be specific, there was some kind of danger of communist rule, of communist taking over of Western European countries that rendered possible the economical development and development of human rights.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of disappointment. I mean, in Germany, there's this very strong phrase that used to be very strong in the 90s, the promise of the German Chancellor at the time, that Eastern Germany is going to turn into flourishing landscapes, right? And that has been cynically repeated over and over again out of disappointment because it didn't work out the way. And I realized that this is just an extreme example of, I mean, of course, transformation in Eastern Germany was much quicker, and there were much more funds transferred into that part of the economy, etc. So I can well imagine that there was an expectation of that side, but you will be much better informed. Maybe not personally because you're too young, but you'll know better than I do about the feeling of disappointment here. I'm not sure. I mean, I have been around at the time as a young person in the early 90s, interested in European politics. I don't think that there was an awareness on part of the established EU countries regarding this expectation. I think it was, probably people weren't aware of the fact that they should invest more or contribute more to a unified Europe at the time. But my recollection is scarce because, as I said, I was just beginning to deal with European matters at the time. So